So, welcome to this episode of Lawyer and Therapist talking about mental health in the legal profession. I've got with me today Mike Caston, who is the lawyer, Lawyering Wise Human, and my name is Peter Abrahamson, the emotional weightlifter for lawyers. Our topic today is the always on culture, and we're going to be talking about that in some detail. But before we do that, why not tell you a little bit about more who we are so that you understand why the two of us have suddenly decided to have a chat about issues in the legal profession that has to do with mental health. So I said I've got Mike with me. So Mike, maybe you want to just give a brief introduction about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. And really nice to be speaking with you today. My name is Mike Casden. I'm a lawyer. I'm a partner at Wigan and Dana, which is a law firm in the U.S. And I do intellectual property, and I've done that my whole career. And I've been at different law firms over my career, and I've been in-house. I've been at big law firms and small law firms. I've been in-house for a technology company. On the side, other than lawyering, I'm also a writer, and I've done quite a bit of writing about mental health at a website called the Good Men Project. Used to keep my sort of mental health advocacy and lawyering very separate, but recently created Lawyering While Human, which is an initiative focusing on mental health and wellness in the legal field, and sort of merged those two interests of mine. And I think like many advocates, I have some personal experience with mental health and depression, and I just think it's a very important topic, and I'm happy to see sort of coming together a little bit more in the working world these days. So really glad to be here.
Thank you, Mike. Absolutely, we've both had our run-in with depression at some point in our lives. I certainly did. I was born in 1961, and I learned to live in 1993. So that tells you how what happened for a long time, and it's past. But it's also something that has made me want to appreciate people more for who they are and what they do. So I have a long career behind me, some 40 years, and I've worked as this and that, translator and interpreter, project manager, but I've always been more interested in the people I worked with than what I was actually hired to do. So I picked up a degree in psychology sort of mid-career, which I then gradually used more and more with the people I worked with, and in the end decided to go solo and focus on helping a group of people who are very stressed and do need a lot of help with their mental health, namely lawyers. It's a worldwide problem, and it's something that we can do something about, either preventative or fixing the problems afterwards. So this is who I am. I am the legal, I'm not a lawyer, I am a psychologist, but I am the emotional weightlifter to the legal profession. Mike and I decided to talk about something today that is something you can probably all relate to, which is being always on, never taking a break. So the always on culture, Mike, what would be your opening comments on that?
I think before I do that, I just also wanted to say that in terms of really being interested in people, I think one of the things about talking about mental health and being in this space has been meeting so many great people, and you're one of those people, and I'm so glad to have this conversation with you. But in terms of being always on, I always considered kind of an important characteristic of my own, a valuable thing to be very responsive and always available, and quick to respond to an email. I thought it was kind of a valuable thing, and I think, of course, it can be valuable, but I also think that it can be taken too far. And when we talk about culture, the always on culture, we're talking about in the legal field, this kind of feeling like you always have to be connected. And I remember, this is going to show how old I was, but I remember when I had a BlackBerry as a lawyer, and that little red light would flash. I just had this addiction where I had to check it immediately, no matter what I was doing. And it's not like it's gotten that much better with iPhones. I remember with the BlackBerry, I went in and turned the little light off so that I could actually not have to respond to it. But
Mm.
it's something everyone struggles with. I think any parent with an iPhone or any human being understands, the draw to other notifications. And one of those things, one of those things is work. You're kind of constantly being pulled away. And so even though I think I always saw that as a positive and sort of almost as like part of my identity. I think when it gets taken too far and when it's embedded in a culture and embedded in your identity, I can also speak to the fact that it's a very negative thing in terms of a lot of things, in terms of brain health and focus and actually being able to do things well.
It's always being on is one of those things that create burnout. It's not the problem. It's not a problem that we work long hours, but it's the quality of those hours. And if we're constantly on feeling that we can never relax, then eventually it's just going to get on top of us, and it destroys our work life because we're jumping from one thing to the next. It destroys our home life because we're actually not there. We are always on the client's case of some sort or another, thinking about, oh, I didn't get this done, I didn't get that done. You wake up in the middle of the night wondering, did I give the right advice? Have I forgotten to do this or that? We may not have Blackberries anymore, but we have emails, we have social media, we have all sorts of electronic devices that remind us that somebody wants something from us. I had a boss once who made a point of not being available because he thought that made him more important than those who were always available, because they were the minions, they were the slaves in the whole system. I don't know if that's something you recognize.
No, I think that's interesting, but it is interesting. Kind of, I thought you were going to go a different direction with that, but I do think building in time when you're not available is actually really important. This is one of those areas where, as I get older and older, I realize that my father was right about more and more things that I used to, argue with him about. And I think this actually dovetails with things like mindfulness. I always sort of pride myself on being a multitasker and love the energy of having a million different things going on at the same time. But, when you do that, there can be an unhealthy aspect to that, where you can't disconnect. There's always something that you're thinking about and worrying about. I remember my father said, well, no, you just do one thing at a time and, turn off the email, turn off the other things. And I never thought I could do it because I got such sort of a buzz from doing all these things.
Yeah.
But on the downside, like, carving out time where you're just doing nothing is super valuable. It's so important. And I really don't think I realized this to the extent I did until going through my depression. And when I did that, when I took time off from work, I learned to take those breaks. And, whether you call it mindfulness or taking a walk with the dog, it's a break and disconnecting, getting away from a screen. And I think it's so important.
I don't think it matters what we call it, as long as we are intentional about what we do. So if you wanted to give good legal advice, if you want to be on top of your profession, you also have to be on top of yourself. So you have to give yourself that break now and again where you take time off, because if you don't do that, you won't be able to do your job properly. If we look back at the latest ALM study, this global study about mental health in the legal profession, 72% of the respondents actually said that this always on culture had a negative impact on their mental health. And interestingly, also 55% said that they had trouble sleeping. So this, to me, as a psychologist, screams stress. So when you're stressed, you don't sleep properly. If you don't sleep properly, your cognitive abilities, which are your ability to think and make decisions and remember stuff, just gets impaired, and then you can't do your work properly. So actually, it's a business risk. So why don't we be kinder to ourselves and our employees and everybody around us, and just take a break from time to time? It feels like 100 years, but it's only 10 minutes, and the world is not going to come to an end. And then I can hear people scream at me now, well, my workload is this, my workload is that. So where does this always on come from? Is it as you suggest, oh, I'm important, I need to be on, my bosses like it, my clients like it? Or is it traditional? Is it pressure? Is it what is it?
I mean, I think it is cultural. I think certainly people can have different tendencies. I think I probably have that tendency. But when we talk about, there is a legal culture and a legal type and an expectation that's set. And I think it's so important to go back to what you said about the business case. And like, we think, and I know I thought, and I'll tell a personal story. We think when we take those breaks, we're getting behind and we should just work, 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 work to catch up, especially with a culture and an industry that operates on the billable hour, right? You're taking a break. That's a time where you're literally not on the clock. And I remember when I took time off, when I came back, I had learned all these techniques, including the importance of taking a break. And it was really valuable. I mean, it's not rocket science, but to be intentionally thinking about those things, how it affects your brain, how it affects your day, was really important to me. But when I went back to work the first time, I immediately thought, oh my God, I've just missed all this time from work. I have to catch up. I have to work. And I didn't integrate those things into my life, and it did not work out well. I think today I can report far from perfect, but I've integrated more of those things into my life. And what's really interesting to me, sort of most interesting in terms of the news, is clients are beginning to realize this. So in the US, there's a company called US Bank that was in the news a few weeks ago that's working with their outside counsel on guidelines for mental health and wellness. And, in the UK, I know the Mindful Business Charter and, which also was client led, are realizing, hey, if my attorneys are always on and they're stressed and not sleeping, and at heart, we are creative problem solvers. We're not going to be as good at our jobs. Mistakes are going to be made. So I love how it lines up with business. I think it really does. It is counterintuitive. You have to sort of fight against that human push oftentimes to just work and get it done and do more. But in reality, when I do take those breaks and get some fresh air and get away from the screens, that's when creativity happens. And I just think it's so important.
That's so true, Mike. I think we worked ourselves into an image of the hardworking, the always stressed, the always in the fast lane. That was the image that was sort of portrayed as being great in the 1980s, and I think it's still stuck with us. Whereas if we then went and thought, I want to be perceived as someone who does really quality work, the clients will come back to you. If you do one super piece of work for a client, they will come back to you next time there's a need, instead of just running them through the mill and hoping for the best and just conveyor belt lawyering. I don't know if you can do that, but I certainly can't do conveyor belt therapy. It just doesn't work. It has to be quality work every time.
Absolutely.
And I just had a client come back to me last week, 2 years after I first met her. Now there was a different need. So she comes back to me because he got good service the first time round. Lawyers can do that, I'm sure, but only if they look after themselves. It's, mental health and well-being is not a perk, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity, and we can all work it in. I'm sure the partners will see the benefit of having healthy employees who do good work and keep the billing going. Because
I think eventually that will be the
it's
case.
important.
Yeah, I think eventually that will be the case. But I'll come back to that word culture, always on culture. Things that are embedded in culture are institutional things that are often hard to change. You think about racism and sexism and dominance-based sort of masculinity, all these sort of social issues. And I think when you have a certain culture, things get embedded, within a law firm of the expectation, and it sort of trickles down and filters into how people act and what people think they're being rewarded and evaluated on. So I think it's going to take really good leadership, and I think there is a compelling case for partners to say, hey, like, this aligns with doing better business and being better humans. But I think there will certainly be a transition period. And I think we really have to be intentional about educating leaders, because I think leaders also fall back into that sort of human tendency to say, well, we don't want people to be lazy, and, we want to make money. And I don't want, people to say, oh, I'm just taking a break, and they disappear for 3 hours and the work doesn't get done. So I think there's a lot of navigating that will need to be done to get there.
For sure. And I think those who are the seniors today, they're brought up in this always on be available all the time culture. So that's what
Exactly.
they learned. That's how they then run their businesses. So
Exactly.
it will take a mindset shift, if you like, to change it. But I also think people want to do that if they can see the benefits. So it's not just about hammering a certain demographic within the business. Let's go and hate all the partners because they're so bad. That's not what it's about. It's about educating and saying you will have a better business if you've got a bunch of really skilled, really enthusiastic lawyers around you who are also able to do the work that they're supposed to be doing.
It is. And I mean,
One of the things I do at a certain point in the evening, I switch Wi-Fi off my phone so it doesn't ding. I don't want to have dings coming in all night when I'm off duty. So that'll have to wait until tomorrow.
yeah, and it's interesting. There are lots of little individual tips and practices, things that you can do to take those breaks or force yourself to take those breaks. And technology is a big piece of it, right? We've created technologies that align with this always on, and I think now the next generation of technology is going to be undoing some of that. But I mean, I also want to make the point that we can change individual things and we can adopt these practices, and I think it is important, like the one you mentioned, perfect. Other people I hear, like in the morning before checking email, before throwing yourself right into that maelstrom, walk the dog, have breakfast, do something creative.
Yes.
So there are lots of different things or practices that people adopt, but in the end, I also if we're saying it's on individuals to change only, then we're sort of blaming the victim almost, if we're not addressing the cultural piece. So that's why I always keep coming back and hammering the culture.
Absolutely.
But I agree. To do that cultural change, you have to be able to talk to different people, including the old school people who said, well, this is different from the way we do it. And you have to show those people this is a viable way to do business and make profits, and that there's a case for it. And you also have to be able to talk to people, of a younger generation, people who just went through, like all of us, who all sort of went through COVID, and we're kind of reframing how we perceive work and life. But I think it's an interesting time to be doing that for that reason.
Yes. Culture change does happen at the top. It has to be a strategy. It has to be something the top wants. But after that, everybody else in the organization has a responsibility to keep it going. I think, Mike, we were talking about giving people 10-minute break, and we've probably gone over a little bit. So maybe now is a good time to ask for all your comments, all your thoughts and ideas about what we talked about. And if anything resonates with you, if you want to have a chat with one or the other of us, there will be details how to get in touch with us after this little video, and you can always find us on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for watching this first episode of The Lawyer and the Therapist Talking Mental Health in the Legal Profession. Thank you for watching, and see you later. Bye.